Kyle Larson says that Bubba Wallace has not apologized to him as of yet. And Ryan Preece gives his comments on him potentially driving a 41 for Stewart-Haas Racing heading into 2023. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We do have one paint scheme to take a look at, and it's Austin Dillon's 2022 DAP Dow scheme they're going to be seeing this weekend at Martinsville Speedway. Really good to see that Dow and DAP are teaming up this weekend to sponsor Austin Dillon. I think this paint scheme does look really good. I think it's looking really solid in my opinion. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing it on the racetrack here this weekend at Martinsville. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're unfortunately taking a sour note to this episode, as Dietrich Mateschitz unfortunately passed away a couple days ago at the age of 78 years old. Dietrich was the co-founder of Red Bull Racing and Formula One and other forms of racing, including NASCAR as well. And they've gone on to win championships in Formula One with many drivers, including Max Verstappen. Really sad day for Formula One and for the Red Bull company as well. My prayers do go out to this family and the Red Bull team as well. My prayers do go out to Dietrich's family. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Toyota. As with basically Toyota dominating this season and getting 12 wins already this year, Toyota has won the 2022 Trucks Manufacturers Championship. Not a major shock here. It seems like every single year Toyota ends up winning the Trucks Manufacturer Championship. I don't think Toyota really has lost a Manufacturer Championship in a long time, so it really isn't a big shock or a big surprise that they once again ended up winning the Trucks Manufacturers title. Not a major shock to me, not a major surprise to me, and once again, they were able to win the Trucks Manufacturers title. Congratulations to them once again on winning the Trucks Manufacturer title. Not a major shock and not a major surprise to me, in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Carson Quaffle. As Carson Quaffle ended up winning the 2022 Cars Tour Championship for Junior Motorsports. Huge congratulations to Carson Quaffle. I think Carson Quaffle is definitely the future of Junior Motorsports. It wouldn't shock or surprise me if in the not-so-distant future, if we do see Carson Quaffle get some Xfinity Series starts maybe in 2023 or 2024. Carson's such a really talented kid who I think really has a ton of potential to be really successful and win championships in NASCAR one day. He's done really good so far. I'm definitely excited to see that he won the Cars Tour Championship. Massive congratulations to him, because he definitely deserved that championship, and it's really great to see he's able to win the championship. Really awesome to see for sure. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Jordan Anderson. Now, it was reported, I believe, by Seth Eckert, and according to reports from FS1, Larry McGrannell says that Jordan Anderson is doing quite well, and his burns are healing much faster than they expected. He is expected to be at Martinsville to support Maya Sider, who, of course, drives his car in the Xfinity Series, and Jordan Anderson will be back at the track this upcoming weekend at Martinsville Speedway. Really good to see that Jordan Anderson is improving. Of course, if you watch the Truck Series race at Talladega Super Speedway, on lap, I think, near the end of stage number 1, Jordan Anderson his truck basically went up in flames, and he hit the inside wall really hard and suffered some minor burns. Great to see that Jordan Anderson is recovering. Again, I don't think he'll be back behind the wheel at all this year, but it's awesome to see that Jordan Anderson is improving, and hope he will improve so he can be back at the racetrack more. Really happy to see this news, and very happy to see that Jordan Anderson is improving. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about 3F Racing. Now, as reported by RJ Stardovich, who runs the NASCAR Report and also is part of the Toby Christie network, he basically reports that 3F Racing was at Homestead at Miami Speedway looking for Xfinity Series drivers, and they're scouting drivers. They're trying to get some engaged for 2023, and they're looking for drivers to potentially drive for them heading into 2023. They will be at the last 2 races of the season, the rest of the last 5 races of the year, as they will be looking to find drivers for 2023. Of course, 3F Racing has a lot of GT experience, which they will have an alliance with Richard Childress Racing, and they will be making their Cup Series debut in 2023. And the plan is for 3F Racing to run 10 races in the Cup Series in 2023. The big question is who's going to drive for them. We really don't know at this point. They're looking at maybe some drivers in the lower ranks in the series and Xfinity, though. But it's awesome to see you have a team like 3F Racing who's wanting to be committed to racing and be committed to the sport. I think it's really exciting to see, and hopefully they can find a driver that they feel confident will do really good for the team in Cup and can be really successful. So really awesome news for sure. Very exciting to see, and glad to see that 3F Racing is at the racetrack gauging their drivers for 2023. Really exciting to see for sure. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about New York City. As was reported by Adam Stern on Saturday that New York City, there's chatter in the F1 paddock currently that a New York City race is still a possibility. And I believe the CEO of Liberty Media basically said that that's also still a possibility. It's not right now what they're looking at, but they said it's not out of the realm of possibility, and they're not closing the door on that. Now, the big question is, will there be a New York City Formula One race? Well, I think that they're wanting to do a New York City Formula One race. I think the big thing is right now they have 3 races in the United States. You do not want to overcrowd that schedule with U.S.-based races. I personally think 3 is the maximum. I do think at some point, and no disrespect for Formula One fans, but I do think at some particular point, I do think the high for Formula One is going to fall off in the United States. I think the fact is, I think that eventually, I think that the high for Formula One is probably going to fall off in the United States just a little bit. So you don't want to overcrowd and overburden the schedule. But I will say that in the future, if it does happen, I think you need to take one of the races from the other tracks, like in Miami or around those areas. Maybe I'll take one of the races from Miami or Las Vegas in the not-so-distant future. I think that's what you would have to do. I would love for a New York City race, don't get me wrong, but I think at the same token and same time, I think you would have to basically take one of those other races from the other states. So not a shock and a not a surprise that it's in conversations, but it sounds like as of right now that it is not going to happen. So I would love it for sure, but I don't see it happening as of now. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tony Kanaan. As it was reported by Marshall Pruitt from Racer.com that Tony Kanaan will be racing in the 2023 Indianapolis 500 in a fourth Era McLaren SP car. This is not a surprise or a shock. It's been rumblings and rumors that he was going to be the fourth driver for Era McLaren SP. Tony Kanaan has competed in many Indianapolis 500s and finishing on the podium in the 2021 Indianapolis 500. And of course, Tony Kanaan won the 2013 Indy 500 with KV Racing Technology. Tony Kanaan will definitely be a threat to win the race for sure with this team. Era McLaren SP was really fast and was contending for the overall victory, and they were up there contending for the win. I think Tony Kanaan is going to have a very strong and a really good shot at winning the race this year, next year. I don't know how many more Tony Kanaan is going to run. Tony Kanaan is definitely getting up there in age for sure by the end of next year. I think he'll be 49 years old, so he's definitely getting up there in age for sure. But Tony Kanaan raced the Indy 500 once again. He's racing a lot, and I think he's trying to also get that record of how many starts you have in the Indy 500. So congratulations to Tony Kanaan, and he picks up a massive victory and to go into this team. Great to see that Tony Kanaan will be racing in the 2023 Indianapolis 500 with Era McLaren SP. Of course, he's got to qualify his way in, which I think he will be able to qualify his way into the race. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the United States Grand Prix. Now, yesterday during the Cup Series race at Homestead, Miami Speedway, you also had the United States Grand Prix. And this race is definitely nuts and definitely crazy. Max Verstappen did end up winning the United States Grand Prix, picking up his 33rd win, his 13th win, which is now tied for the most with Sebastian Vettel and Michael Schumacher in a single season. There were a couple of big wrecks in the race. You had one, Fernando Alonso basically ran into the back of Lance Stroll, who threw a really late block. That could have been extremely dangerous. You had Valtteri Bottas go off the track and get stuck in the gravel trap. But at the end of the day, Max Verstappen passed Lewis Hamilton with around 7 laps to go to pick up the victory. And also, Red Bull has won the Constructors' Championship as well. Well-deserved win, in my opinion. Max Verstappen, like many weeks, had the fastest car once again. It's been an extremely dominant year. I think it's very likely that Max is going to break that win record because, again, he's got 13 wins. He's likely going to break that win record in a couple weeks at Mexico of how fast Red Bull's been this year. I think going into next year, if he continues to have a rocket ship like this, the next target for him is Ayrton Senna. He's 6th on the all-time winless, and I think there's a really good chance and a really good possibility that Max Verstappen might break that wins record. So congratulations to Max Verstappen on winning the United States Grand Prix, a major win for Max Verstappen. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Logan Sargent. As it has been reported by multiple media outlets that Logan Sargent will drive for Williams in 2023 if he ends up getting a super license. Logan Sargent currently is 3rd in the championship in Formula 2. If he remains in that position, he will get a super license. And if that's the case, he will become the first driver to race in Formula 1 full-time since Scott Speed, when he ran it back for, I think, 2006, 2007. And he will be the first American to even race in Formula 1 since 2015, when Alexander Rossi drove for Banner Racing. This is absolutely huge. Logan Sargent is a very talented driver, in my opinion. And I think Logan Sargent has definitely earned a spot and definitely earned a ride to get in Formula One. I think he will be a very good run pickup for sure for the team. I still think Alex Albon is going to be the better driver because I think Albon is a better driver than Logan Sargent. But I think Logan Sargent will actually have a legitimate chance and a legitimate shot at getting some points. I really think a lot of times next year, especially look at Logan Sargent, I think he's a better driver than Nicholas Latifi. I don't think Latifi's been a really good driver in this series, to be honest. No disrespect to Latifi, but Latifi hasn't really performed. I think he will do a really good job in this ride, and I'm definitely excited to see that he'll be likely going to Williams in 2023. This is a huge pickup, in my opinion, for the team. Really exciting to see. I know some other drivers probably deserve it more, but I think Logan Sargent is a big pickup for the team, and I'm definitely excited to see Logan Sargent will be racing for Williams in Formula One in 2023, pending, of course, if he does end up getting a super license. That's going to be the big key thing that will keep him out if he doesn't get that, but it sounds like they're working on it. It does sound like that he will likely be getting a super license in 2023. He's 9 points ahead of fourth, finished top 3. He will get a super license. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Dale Jr. As on the grid Sunday before the Cup Series race took place, Dale Jr. says his drivers have been suspended for retaliation on the racetrack, and he says that it should be the same penalty for every driver in all the other series as well. He's basically referencing the fact that he's really surprised that even Noah Gragson, who retaliated at Road America, also did not get suspended for the wreck. I'm with Dale Jr. on that one. I'm really shocked and surprised that Noah Gragson did not get suspended for the incident at Road America back a few months ago, considering Noah Gragson intentionally wrecked Sage Karam down the straightaway. Yes, it was a slower straightaway and a slower corner that he wrecked him, but he still right-reared him down the straightaway regardless and caused a massive wreck. They actually ended up injuring Brandon Brown very slightly, and drivers that could have ended up getting hurt in that wreck. Noah Gragson received a 30-point penalty for that wreck, and he should have been suspended for the next race, or should have been parked for the rest of the race with that dirty move he ended up making. I agree with Dale Jr. I think this is a fair penalty. Now, if I do somewhat agree with Jeff Burton, if they do it again, 2-race suspension, you got to get this message across, because right-rearing somebody down the straightaway is completely unacceptable, in my opinion. And I think it's justified that we saw a penalty for Bubba Wallace for what he did. I do agree with Dale Jr., though, that there definitely needs to be a penalty for that, and I think it needs to be the penalty going forward. I think it's definitely the right call, in my opinion. I'm glad to see that they ended up making that call, because I think it is the right call, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about ESPN. As it is expected, Formula One has signed a contract TV extension with ESPN to continue carrying the races through 2025. And the big thing for Formula One fans, I think, are going to be really happy about this, is that ESPN will have commercial-free races for the next 3 years. This is a massive continuation to pick up. There have been some rumors that commercials might have been added. Some side-by-side commercials were going to be added. We kind of talked about this back in June. This was expected, but now it's officially confirmed that ESPN will continue to carry races in Formula One for the next 3 seasons. In my opinion, this is absolutely huge. I think ESPN, again, has done a really good job covering the races, commercial-free races for the last 4 years. It's something that I really, really wish NASCAR could be able to do. So I think having commercial-free races where you focus on the battles and you focus on the racing, I think that is huge. And I'm very happy to see ESPN will continue to carry races for Formula One for the not-so-distant future for the next 3 years. And I think that ESPN probably will get extended at least for the next few years. I think it will depend on how long Sky Sports' contract is, which they signed a contract extension a few weeks ago to continue carrying races. In my opinion, I think it's absolutely a well-deserved contract extension for the TVs, and I'm really excited to see that ESPN will continue to carry races in the future. I think it's really exciting, and it's really great to see, in my opinion. Very happy to see for sure that ESPN will continue to carry Formula One races for the next 3 years. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Thor Sport Racing, as we got to talk about a little bit more race manipulation. Now, at the end of the Truck Series race, Ben Rhodes had the last position in points, and Matt Crafton had the fastest truck on track. All of a sudden, Matt Crafton started backing off behind Ben Rhodes, and he basically started backing off and started losing a ton of ground all of a sudden. Eventually, Christian Eckes started battling because he was still in the championship. But Matt Crafton basically did not pass Ben Rhodes. Now, why did he not pass Ben Rhodes? Well, Ben Rhodes basically was up by 1 point, and if he passed Ben Rhodes, there was going to be a tiebreaker, which I think was so gone to Ben Rhodes regardless. I am not shocked or surprised to see that Thorsport's trying to help. The big question is that are we going to see any sort of penalties for race manipulation? Apparently there was some radio communication that apparently came out saying tiebreaker. I think that's really what happened, if I'm not mistaken. There had been radio communication that came out saying tiebreaker. So are we going to see any sort of penalties take place? That is a big question currently at the moment that we don't know right now if there are going to be penalties that is going to be handed out to Thorsport. I would not be shocked if there are penalties that are handed out. Again, I don't know if there is going to be. We'll have to definitely wait and see if there are penalties, but I think there definitely was for sure some clear race manipulation right there. And I would not be shocked if there are penalties handed out. We'll have to wait and see what happens, but it sounds like there could be penalties handed out later this week, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tony Stewart. As there is some very interesting tweet that came out from Jeff Gluck saying that Tony Stewart was originally supposed to give the command this past weekend at Homestead Miami Speedway. Kip Moore instead gave that command. His command was a little bit all over the place. Now, Tony Stewart, according to Rusty Wallace, from his tweet, he said that Tony Stewart was at a Smithfield event, Major League convention. Of course, we know that Tony Stewart is basically doing the sponsorship commitments, but Tony Stewart really said publicly that he does not really want to be at NASCAR races currently at the moment. This is really, really interesting nugget. I think right now there's a couple things. One, I don't think Tony Stewart really wants to be in NASCAR race, and of course he wasn't that Smithfield commitment. But number two, you give Tony Stewart a hot mic right now, and Tony Stewart's probably going to go off. So I'm not shocked he didn't give the command. I think NASCAR probably told him that he probably didn't. You're not giving the command, especially how vocal you've been about sport. You're probably not going to end up giving the command because of how vocal you have been. I would not be surprised if that's how it went down. Or Tony Stewart just didn't want to give the command. He had something else he really wanted to do at the time. Obviously, we got some big Tony Stewart news that came out very recently. They'll be racing in NHRA, which we'll talk about later this week. But Tony Stewart, of course, obviously, am not very shocked and surprised to see this news. And it's not a major shock and surprise me. That's kind of how it went down. Again, I wish Tony would have been able to give the command. I think it'd been fun to hear Tony Stewart give a really good and joyful command. But honestly, with how vocal Tony Stewart's been, I don't think you really want to give him a hot mic currently at the moment. So I'm not surprised or shocked to see that Tony Stewart didn't give the command. But I think it'd definitely been really cool to see him give the commands. I think it'd been fun to see how he would react. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Trevor Bayne. As Trevor Bayne reported on USA that he says he's still unsure on what he will be doing in 2023. Trevor Bayne obviously has been doing really, really good so far in Xfinity Series, but just concluded his run in the NASCAR Xfinity Series is he will not be racing the last two races of the Xfinity Series season, as we're going to see Sammy Smith drive the number 18 the last two races in Xfinity this season. Trevor Bayne has made around 10 or 11 starts this year in Xfinity, and while he did not get a win, he has been very competitive, and let's be for real, Trevor Bayne probably should have minimum gotten at least 1 or 2 wins this year of how fast he was. I remember Auto Club, his first start with the team, how really fast he was. He led a lot of laps, but pit crew kept making a ton of mistakes, and he nearly came back and won the race at Auto Club, but was not able to get it done. I think, obviously, when you look at Trevor Bayne, how much talent Trevor Bayne really, really has, I think Trevor Bayne has done a really strong job in that 18 car, and I really hope that he gets an opportunity to drive full-time with Joe Gibbs Racing next season. I think he's done a really awesome job with the team. And again, I really hope he does get to run full-time next year with a really strong and a really competitive team. So I think Trevor Bayne is a really awesome and a great driver for the series. And I do hope that Trevor Bayne does get an opportunity to race full-time with Joe Gibbs Racing, because I think he's a legitimate championship threat and a legitimate championship contender if you put him in there full-time. I think he's a good driver, and I think for sure he deserves to be full-time with Joe Gibbs Racing next year, because I think he deserves an opportunity to drive for them in 2023, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about 23XI Racing. Now, we do have a couple things to talk about from the Pretty Intense podcast that Denny Hamlin was on. First, let's talk about the formation of 23XI Racing. Obviously, Denny Hamlin has, I think, talked about this in the past, but Denny Hamlin went on the podcast and talked about how 23XI Racing was formed. So back a few years ago, and I remember this very, very well, there were some major rumblings and some major rumors that Denny Hamlin and Michael Jordan were going to purchase a minority ownership stake in Richard Petty Motorsports, which did not end up being true. This is from an article that came out. Then they basically sent this to Michael. Michael said, "Do you want to make this happen?" This is when Denny Hamlin was basically on the golf course. And eventually they had a meeting, got a itinerary basically sent out, like a list. And basically they had a meeting, and this ended up happening, and they had a handshake. And now they have basically had the ground running for the last 2 years. You look at sets of 23XI Racing so far. 23XI Racing in the first years, they're a team that has shown so much progress in the last few years. They've gotten 3 wins as an organization, 1 with Kurt Busch, and 2 wins with Bubba Wallace. And I think going into 2023 as well, you have to look at 23XI Racing as a team that definitely is going to show, I think, many more improvement, especially with the pickup of Tyler Reddick going to the team next year. I think 23XI Racing is a team that is only going to continue to grow and only going to continue to improve as an organization. The team has just taken major steps forward, and I think it's going to be really great to see how much the team has already done in these first 2 years. And I think next year you're going to have to watch out for 23XI Racing next year. I think that they are going to be a championship threat next year in the third year, which normally a third-year team doesn't end up doing what they've been doing. So I'm really excited for the future of 23XI Racing, but it's just incredible to see how much where this team has come from, where this team has gone, and it's great to see that 23XI Racing has done as much as they have already, and they're a team, I think, that is set for the long-term future, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Kyle Busch. There was another interesting note that came out from the Pretty Intense podcast where Denny Hamlin said that they tried to actually get Kyle Busch to drive for 23XI Racing. But he says that there was no long-term deal for Kyle Busch, and Kyle Busch, of course, wanted a long-term deal. And he says there's uncertainty if there were going to be a 3-car team heading into 2024. Obviously, right now, 23XI Racing is a 2-car organization. There is a possibility that they could be a 3-car team, at least in select starts next year, because it depends on if Kurt Busch is able to be cleared or not. Kurt Busch could run a 3rd car, and hopefully that number he does run is number 97. But this isn't a major shock and a major surprise to me, and honestly, why would Kyle Busch want to drive for a team that's not Joe Gibbs Racing? Basically, a second team in the Toyota pipeline. Because let's be for real, they're not the number 1 team. They're the number 2 team currently at the moment. So I'm really not shocked or not really surprised at this particular point that he did not decide to go to 23XI Racing. Don't get me wrong, he definitely wanted to go there, but I think at the time also Kyle Busch is thinking about, was Kurt Busch going to come back and race in 2023 or come back and race in 2022 and finish the season? Because at the time, we all remember this, Kurt Busch did want to make a return. We now know at this point Kurt Busch will not be back in 2022 and very likely will be running many races in 2023. In my opinion, though, it would have definitely been cool to see Kyle Busch drive for 23XI Racing and take that team a next major step forward. But I think it is a good thing that Kyle Busch decided to go to Richard Childress Racing because, again, I think Richard Childress Racing is set for the long-term future, especially if how well Kyle Busch has done with the team. I think he's going to really set this team up for the long-term future. I think if you are a fan of RCR, I think it's a really exciting time. Would have been cool to see Kyle Busch drive for 23XI Racing? Absolutely. But I really do believe, in my opinion, that I think we're going to see some big things going into 2023 for Richard Childress Racing, and I'm expecting big things for the team heading into 2023. Now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about John Hunter Nemechek. As I had reported on Saturday before the Truck Series race took place at Homestead, that John Hunter Nemechek says on the FS1 podcast that Toyota has a plan for him going into 2023. Now, we really don't know what that plan is for John Hunter Nemechek, so let's discuss where I think John Hunter could end up driving in 2023. Obviously, it's not going to be with Kyle Busch Motorsports because Kyle Busch Motorsports is going to be switching to a Chevy-based team, and we're probably not so long for knowing who will be driving for that team next year. We don't know exactly who will be driving, but Nick Sanchez is currently rumored as a potential driver for Kyle Busch Motorsports next year. John Hunter Nemechek, I think, has a ride set for him next year, and I think is going to be moving up to the NASCAR Xfinity Series. I think John Hunter Nemechek will be driving one of the Joe Gibbs Racing Xfinity Series cars. More than likely, I think he'll be taking over the 19 next year and be taking over for Brandon Jones in 2023. The reason being is, one, I think John Hunter Nemechek in his select NASCAR Xfinity Series starts with Joe Gibbs Racing, he has done a really strong and a really good job. And I also expect that John Hunter will only continue to improve heading into 2023. And I think if you put him in a Joe Gibbs Racing Xfinity Series car, he will definitely be a championship threat. I think John Hunter, like I said, has done a really solid and a really good job driving for the Toyota throughout his career that he's driven for the team. Got back to Truck Series and drove for Kyle Busch Motorsports. While he won't be competing for a Truck Series championship in 2023, I think you have to look at this as a successful year with 2 wins this year for John Hunter. And again, just he had good pace and good speed throughout the year. Just had a lot of unfortunate mistakes, kind of very similar to Kyle Larson in 2022. He kind of just had a lot of mistakes that kind of cost him a shot, an opportunity as well. He took himself out of contention. but I think he'll be likely in Xfinity competing for a championship there. He's been successful in trucks, and I would expect going into 2023, he'll be driving for Joe Gibbs Racing in Xfinity. I also wouldn't be shocked and surprised with the rumors that DJR is going to be switching to Toyota, that he does make a few select starts for David Gillen Racing in 2023. We'll have to wait and see what happens, but I think John Hunter has a ride set for 2023, and I think it's going to be driving for the next year, going to be driving for Joe Gibbs Racing Xfinity Series program next season. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Kyle Larson and Martin Truex Jr. As near the end of the Cup Series race, on the final pit stop of the race, we saw a major pit incident happen between the two leaders up front. Coming to pit road, due basically to sunset and the sun glare, Martin Truex Jr. really went and had a really late entrance to his pit road. Kyle Larson ran into the back of him, and then nearly the pit crew members may have ended up getting clipped. There might have been a couple of pit crew members who ended up getting clipped for the incident. And Truex spun in his pit stop, and Truex fell back to 19th. He did rebound and finish 6th in the race, and did take somewhat responsibility for the incident on the racetrack, but also kind of blame Kyle Larson for that as well. Let's talk about who's at fault for the incident. To me, I think this is a no-brainer. I think Martin Truex Jr. is at fault for the incident, and I'll explain why. While Kyle Larson did run in the back of Martin Truex Jr., Kyle Larson really couldn't do anything about it. That is on Martin Truex Jr. for many, many reasons. Number one, Martin Truex Jr. literally turned in his pit stop late. Look at what Ross Chastain did. Ross Chastain turned his pit, basically turned a lane, like 2 or 3 pit entries early, and basically went to the left. Martin Truex Jr. never turned to the left and had a really late entry. That is not normal what Martin Truex Jr. did. So obviously that is on Martin Truex Jr. Yes, I know Truex is not going to take full responsibility, which is understandable. He's not going to take full responsibility for that. But in my opinion, when it comes to the incident, I think Martin Truex Jr. is at fault for the incident. I know people are going to say, oh, Kyle Larson did it on purpose, that he cheated his way into a win. But you look how dominant Larson was in the race as well. Kyle Larson led 199 out of 267 laps in this race and had by far the best car. I think that Larson would have beat Martin Truex Jr. in the long run just because I think Kyle Larson's car was stronger anyways. And it's a shame what happened to Truex, because it seems like every single week Martin Truex Jr. finds a way to lose one of these Cup Series races. But I think in this situation, in all honesty, I think you have to put the blame on Martin Truex Jr. for that, because Truex was going to miss his pit stop. Kyle Larson really kind of helped him anyways, getting this pit stop anyways. So, in my opinion, I think Martin Truex Jr. is at fault, unfortunately. Again, it sucks that basically what happened, because I don't think anybody wanted that to happen, and Larson did not want that to happen for sure. Believe me on that. But it's not a shocker or surprise to me what happened. It's a shame that what happened there on pit road, because in all honesty, in all seriousness, I think Martin Truex Jr. could have had a chance to beat Larson, but I think, unfortunately, Truex kind of cost himself a win. Another way to lose for Martin Truex Jr. and another way for Martin Truex Jr. to lose the race. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about Ryan Preece. Now, we've talked about Ryan Preece on the channel a couple times as of recently, and there's been some rumors that Ryan Preece could potentially drive the 41 in 2023, as Tony Stewart wants Ryan Preece to be in the 41 car heading into 2023. However, Stewart-Haas wants to keep Cole Custer in the 41 car for another season, despite the lackluster performances. Now, Ryan Preece was interviewed by Dalton Hopkins from FrontStretch.com, and he asked Ryan Preece, is how good is it to have Tony Stewart around your corner? Ryan Preece basically says it's good to have Tony Stewart in his corner, who really wants Ryan Preece in that 41 car next season, especially if how Cole Custer has had the lack performances. And he says he's unsure if he will be driving that car, but we'll have to wait and see. Now, the big question around Ryan Preece is that, let's talk about Ryan Preece for a minute. Ryan Preece in 2022, driving a 17 car for DJR Racing, who has had an alliance this year with Stewart-Haas Racing. Ryan Preece has had a lot of really strong performances. In fact, has won a race this year in the Camp World Truck Series at Nashville, going back-to-back at Nashville. His 2 career wins have come in Nashville Super Speedway in the Truck Series, but he's also been very solid and has been contending up front in many races this year, and had another strong run at Homestead Miami Speedway, where he went into the top 5. So Ryan Preece obviously has the talent to back it up and has done a really good job in the Truck Series this year. But the big question is going to come down to Gene's decision. I know that Gene wants to keep Cole Custer in the 41 car, and I understand that money's going to come down to everything. However, if I had to choose who would go in the 41 car, I would put Ryan Preece behind the wheel of the 41 car. Cole Custer is not cutting it. He has had so many lackluster performances this year. He ran horrendous this past week and got outperformed by a lot of teams this past weekend at Homestead. Sure, there are other drivers that kind of struggle. Austin Tinder kind of struggled in this race. Eric Jones kind of struggled. But I don't think Ryan Preece is real. I don't think that Cole Custer has cut it in the Cup Series. I don't think Cole Custer is a bad driver. I think he deserves a chance to still be in the Cup Series. But I would think if I had to move Cole Custer somewhere, I would move into the 15 Rick Ware racing car. But I would give that 15 car SHR performance level equipment. I would give that top 10 type equipment. See what Cole Custer can do with Rick Ware Racing. Because in my opinion, I think if you put Ryan Preece in the 41 car next year, I think Ryan Preece will absolutely be an underdog to make the playoffs. I think he'll do better than what Cole Custer's done, and I think he will contend for wins a lot more. I think that one of the biggest things that's holding SHR back is Cole Custer. I think Cole Custer's holding the team back currently right now. So I think Almirola's done better this year. Yes, Almirola's kind of fallen back in the second half of this year, and he's been like a 28th place driver most of the year. But I think that Ryan Preece, in all seriousness, I think Ryan Preece is a driver that would do a much better job for Stewart-Haas Racing. We know Tony Stewart wants him in the 41 car, and it's obviously wants him in the 41 car, and I wouldn't blame him. I think Ryan Preece is a better driver. And obviously, Stewart-Haas Racing has to kind of look at the future right now. Sure, you don't have a lot of talent currently in Ford at the moment, and Zane Smith, really, who I think is the best driver in Ford right now, outside of Ryan Preece, I think he's going to be locked up front row for many, many years, and I don't see him going anywhere, and he's probably going to end up in front row in the long term. But I think if I'm in a position of Ryan Preece currently at the moment, I think you put him in the 41 car next year. You put Cole Custer back in the 15 car, but then I think eventually you bring him back to Stewart-Haas Racing. You keep him in SHR family because I think Cole Custer's got to step it up. I mean, if he doesn't step it up at some point, because again, this is the time for him to step up, and he really hasn't done that. Custer's only got him on like 12 top 10s overall. So in my honest opinion, if I had to choose to go in the 41 car, I put Ryan Preece in the 41 car. That 41 car will not only be a lot more competitive, but I think it will be a playoff contender if you put Ryan Preece behind the wheel of the 41 car. We're probably not going to know who truly is behind the wheel of the 41 car probably till the end of the season and probably till the end of the year in all honesty. But if I had to choose, I would for sure be putting Ryan Preece in the 41 car next year. I think you're not only going to have better performance from Ryan Preece next year, but I think Ryan Preece definitely deserves an opportunity to drive the 41. So if I had to choose, I would definitely be putting Ryan Preece in the 41 car heading into 2023, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking more about Denny Hamlin and Kyle Larson's comments from the Bubba Wallace incident. We've already talked about this on the channel multiple times this past week, but basically on lap number 95 or 96 of the NASCAR Cup Series race that took place at Las Vegas last week, Bubba Wallace got ran up the racetrack by Kyle Larson as Kyle Larson made a really, really aggressive move. Basically, Bubba Wallace went into the outside wall and might have damaged the toe link. Bubba Wallace, in retaliation, cut across the racetrack and retaliated into Kyle Larson, spinning him up the racetrack, collecting Christopher Bell, putting Christopher Bell in pretty much in a must-win situation going into Martinsville this week, and basically already putting him in a must-win situation after that. Didn't have a good run for Bell, and Bell really, really struggled. We've already talked about how Christopher Bell said that Bubba did apologize, and he said it on the broadcast as well. Now, also, basically, NBC wanted to bring Bubba Wallace on a Zoom call, but Bubba declined to do it, which isn't a shock or surprise to me. Bubba Wallace will be back this week at Martinsville, but drivers had some comments. Denny Hamlin, who is a co-owner of 2311 Racing, Denny basically says that 2311 Racing has gone above and beyond on the Bubba Wallace penalties. He basically says he understands where we stand on the situation, he understands where we stand, and he also says that he understands NASCAR's penalties as well. But he also says that it's a shame what happened here because Bubba Wallace has really taken some major steps forward. It has taken some major improvements this season as a character, really since the Nashville incident. And Denny Hamlin's absolutely right. Bubba Wallace has been a lot better mentally and really until this point, Bubba Wallace had been really, really having a great year. Up to the playoffs, the last 10 races in the regular season, he had the best average finish anybody in the field, and he had a stretch of 4 or 5 straight top 10s near the end of the regular season. Bubba Wallace had really been improving and also got a win at Kansas, and I think a lot of people are going to look at how he really reacted in this situation. But I do think Bubba Wallace truly has improved as a driver. And I think, as Denny Hamlin says, I think he will come back stronger as a race car driver. I expect Bubba coming this week at Martinsville. I think he will take some major steps forward. I think he's already done that this year, and I think he's done a really awesome job, in my opinion, as a race car driver and improving as a race car driver. So I think he will come back stronger and be a better driver. But we've got to talk about the other side of the story. Kyle Larson finally broke silence this past Saturday. Of course, he did win the Cup Series race at homestead Miami Speedway in dominating fashion. But Kyle Larson basically broke his silence in this situation, and he said that he has not spoken to Bubba Wallace, and Bubba Wallace did not send a text or didn't even apologize him. But Kyle Larson basically said he's trying to move on from the situation. He says that he did not expect an apology and has not received a text. This does not shock or surprise me. Look, I don't think that they will talk with each other until probably after this weekend at Martinsville, since Bubba will be back at the racetrack. Look, I'm not really shocked or surprised that he didn't expect apology. I think how Kyle Larson has really handled the situation, really since the beginning of the incident happened in Las Vegas last week, I think Kyle Larson has handled this very, very well. And I do think Bubba Wallace probably also handled this well off the racetrack. I think what Bubba did, he knows what he did was wrong. Absolutely. I think right rearing somebody down the straightaway is completely unacceptable. And I think the penalty was justified. I know Kyle Petty said that he probably should suspended for the rest of the year. I don't agree with that personally. But again, I think in this situation, you look at it, it isn't a shock that Bubba didn't apologize to him. And Bubba doesn't have to apologize, and Larson completely understands. I think it shows how much improvement Larson has done ever since the incident happened a few years ago. And I just think it shows that Larson understands that Bubba probably was mad in the situation. And again, they'll probably talk this upcoming weekend at Martinsville. I don't expect anything else from it. I don't think you're going to see any issues between the two of them going forward. And I think both of them will talk after. Again, and they're friends. At the end, well, they were friends. I don't know if they're friends anymore. But truthfully, I think that we're going to see them talk, and I think that we will see more about this probably come out. I really do want to end this conversation. Don't get me wrong. I think we already know what happened. Bubba was in the wrong for the situation. We know he made a mistake. But I think Bubba Wallace, like I said, has really showed some great improvement. And I think when it comes to Bubba, when I go back to talk about Bubba Wallace, I think he will continue to improve. And I think in 2023, we're going to see a big year for 23XI Racing. I really think that we're going to see this team just get much better and continue to show massive, massive improvements. I'm just so excited to see what 23XI Racing can do, especially with the addition of Todd Reddick coming to the team next year. I really think that this team is going to not only get better, but I think they're going to get much stronger as well. So I am definitely good. It sucks that they haven't been able to apologize, but again, I'm not surprised. I think, again, no one really should be surprised. I think the story really just is kind of, I'm hoping for the story to kind of end, in my opinion. It's good to see that that Larson has spoken out, but at the same token, at the same time, I think Larson understands that Bubba didn't have to apologize to him, in my opinion. So that is for today's Law, NASCAR, and Motorsports video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links description below over that, and combo your thoughts on today's video. What are your thoughts about Kyle Larson not being apologized by Bubba Wallace? Do you think that Bubba's in the wrong for that or not? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts on Ryan Preece potentially driving for Stewart-Haas Racing in 2023? Let me know in the comments below. Tomorrow on my channel, we're going to have race picks for the upcoming race at Martinsville. Wednesday will be another NASCAR news video. Thursday, we'll be telling you who I think will make the championship 4. And then Friday, another NASCAR news video. And then Saturday and Sunday, we will be having race reviews and reactions to the races for Xfinity and Cup, who we decide who goes to the championship 4. And then next week, we begin championship week with a lot of content on the channel. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.